Today, we've made a video for those of you who just got their first espresso machine at home. What we want to do today is get you from where you are, a brand new espresso machine owner, to really tasty coffee as quickly and as easily as possible. Let me tell you a little story for context. 20 years ago, I worked selling little domestic coffee machines made by a manufacturer called Gadget. They're still very popular today, and at one point, I ended up on the other end of the support email that you would email if you had an issue. And my mind was blown by how many people were having a frustrating time because they didn't know what the problem was. They knew the coffee didn't taste right, but was the machine broken? Was it them? What was going wrong in all of this? And sometimes it's hard to know. So we're going to give you a little flowchart to go through today to kind of give you some ways of thinking about what might be going wrong and how to make sure it goes right, what the right thing to do is, and which problem it is you might need to solve. If you are a seasoned espresso maker at home, this is a video I hope you can share easily with friends who are just starting that journey down the rabbit hole. Now, going back to that story of 20 years ago, being the support person on the other end of these emails, well, the world was very different then. The most common complaint people had is that they had bought this lovely new machine, several £100s, they'd gone to the supermarket, they'd bought a brand of, pretty well-known coffee. It was pre-ground, they'd brought it home, put it in the machine, the coffee was terrible. The coffee was undrinkably bad. Now, why would the supermarket sell them something that wasn't right? Was their thinking. Like, this is good, it's a well-known brand, the coffee can't be the problem, it must be the machine. And so hundreds of people would send these emails being like, my machine is broken, the coffee brews too fast, it tastes thin and disgusting and terrible. The world has moved on. I think people understand now that you have to have a coffee grinder to get the best out of an espresso machine. And that, in some ways, is more true than ever because espresso machines, even the cheap ones, have gotten way, way, way better. What espresso machines do is actually very simple. They get water hot, they push it forwards at a reasonably consistent pressure, they disperse it over a bed of coffee, and then the coffee is kind of the most important bit of the whole espresso making process. So without a grinder, you've got no control over that process. And by grinder, I mean a burr grinder that is adjustable. Now, you will find cafes that do offer to grind coffee for you, and they'll do it for espresso if you ask them to. The problem is, espresso grind setting is quite a precise thing, and they can't know your dose, your machine, and get it exactly right. So chances are, and I'm talking 9 out of 10 times, if not higher, they'll have ground the coffee wrong, even though it's technically ground for espresso. And the shots you get may run too fast or too slow, and ultimately just not taste very good. Plus, once you grind coffee, it goes stale really, 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 really quickly. So that's why a grinder is so important. That's your basic requirement. Let's now get into the flowchart of questions. I will say at this point that for every question that we're going to ask, we have made a much longer video answer that will link down the description below. If you want more explanation than I'm going to give you, because this is just a kind of brief overview of the key stuff to worry about, well then click that video, learn some more, and hopefully understand a little bit more. There is delight in the details, I promise. Is your coffee fresh? This is an important thing. Defining fresh is actually really tricky. Generally, I would say you want to be using your coffee for espresso anywhere from, say, 2 to 6 weeks from its roasting on date. That's a pretty good window. You can go a little earlier, sometimes with darker roasts. You can go a little later, sometimes with lighter roasts, but that's a pretty good window to be operating in. Coffee declines rapidly compared to a bunch of other stuff, but it remains food safe for years. So often no one puts a roast date on it. If the coffee doesn't have a roast date, you're not going to get the best out of it or your coffee setup, whatever your setup is. So you need fresh coffee with a roast date, I think, to have a good time. Occasionally you can reverse engineer a best before date by taking 1 or 2 years off the use by date, but ultimately I would say just go for something freshly roasted with lots of traceability on its roast date. Question 2. Is the recipe right? Now, let's say we've got fresh coffee, that's good news. We're grinding it fresh, that's good news. We're using it in our coffee machine. Is the recipe right? Now, most of the time, coffee roasters will give you some guidance on an ideal recipe. And an ideal recipe will usually include how much ground coffee to use, how much liquid espresso in terms of weight you want to get from that ground coffee, and there's usually a ratio between those two things, how long it should take to brew the coffee, and sometimes you might get recommendations on the brewing temperature, but honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about that at this point. Now, this stage does benefit from you having a small digital scale. That will make coffee making way easier, especially at the beginning, but all the way through, actually. They don't need to be expensive. You can get a cheap one on the internet, but just a useful digital scale is a wonderful thing. If you know how much ground coffee you've got in, let's say 18 grams, and you know your desired recipe output, let's say 40 grams of liquid espresso, your grind size is what's going to control the brewing time. The finer you grind coffee, the better the pieces fit together, and therefore the harder it is for the water to be pressed through that bed of coffee, therefore the longer it will take to get your desired amount of liquid. Often something like 25 to 35 seconds is a good window to start in. Roasters will give you a bunch of recommendations, typically by coffee if they're a passionate roaster. If you can't get that information, then I think a 1-to-2 ratio is a good place to start. So that would be, say, 18 grams of ground coffee in a double basket, going to 36 grams up to, say, 40 grams of liquid out in that 25 to 35 second window. This is a very, very, very broad recipe. It won't work with every single coffee perfectly. But if you're there, things should be tasting decent. Maybe not perfect, but pretty good. So on the recipe front, there's two other things that we need to talk about just quickly. One of those are called pressurized baskets. Some machines will come with these baskets that are designed for that pre-ground supermarket coffee that just isn't right. So what they do is they basically pretend to have lots of holes, and then they have one little hole underneath to kind of add the resistance that coffee should add. They'll produce coffee with crema, but it won't be very delicious because the coffee ultimately isn't ground finely enough. Wherever possible, these are to be avoided, and you should use a proper basket suitable for proper espresso brewing. The other thing we should talk about is called puck prep. You can get really into this, but you don't have to. All you want to think about is that before you compact that bed of coffee, you'll have a tamper to squish it down so it's flat and even. You're going to press till it feels sort of solid and compact and not sort of soft and squishy anymore. You want that bed to be as even as possible everywhere. If you have a mound of coffee on one side of the basket, when you compact it down, you'll have a very uneven puck. And when that high pressure water hits it, more water will flow through less coffee, where it's a little bit thinner. That won't taste very good. So just think about evenness before you compact, and then make sure it's level and properly pressed down. You don't need to press incredibly hard, just till you feel like you've hit resistance ultimately, and it's not getting any more compacted. Oh no, the coffee still tastes bad. You do not like what you're drinking. Well, what's wrong with it? Is the coffee too sour, or is the coffee too bitter? The sort of question hidden inside this is, are those the right coffee beans for you? This is a massively important question. It's kind of the most important question in a whole bunch of ways. It's a really difficult question for a lot of people to answer straight away. Coffee has an incredible variety of flavors. It has different intensities of things like acidity and bitterness and sweetness and texture, and then a range of flavors all on top of this. There's a huge amount of choice. There's loads of different brands of roasters. They do lots of different coffees. How on earth do you know that you've got the right raw materials for you? Now, this is such a giant headache that people go out, they buy a good coffee machine, they buy some coffee that they think they might like. Turns out it's not coffee that they like, but they don't know that yet. They brew the coffee, they hate it, they think the machine is at fault, they complain to the manufacturer. One manufacturer has gone so far as to build a dedicated website to try and get people good coffee that they will like, because this will solve such a massive customer service issue for them. So I know it's a big deal. But how do you buy coffee that you know you're going to like before you've tasted it? Well, one simple option is to have tasted it first. You can always buy coffee from a coffee shop that you like, whose coffee you know you like. They'll tell you what coffee they're brewing. They'll often sell you a bag. That's a great place to start. But maybe you don't have a good coffee shop near you, and that's what's driven you to espresso at home. So this means you're going to be buying coffee online. How do you do that effectively when you're just starting out? How do you get something you know you're going to like? Well, I would say a lot of people get into coffee have a little bit of a journey, and the coffees that they enjoy very easily at the start are coffees that tend to fall into the kind of flavor notes of brown things. Go with me here. That would be things like chocolates or nuts or caramel or biscuity flavors, warm things that result from kind of browning flavors from roasting or from heat, that kind of group of things that are typically sweet. Often these coffees will have lower acidity. When you're shopping online, these kinds of coffees are more often than not blends. That means they're composed of coffees from lots of different origins, maybe 2 to 5 different farms or countries that have produced the coffee. These are typically not the most expensive coffees on a roaster's website. Often they'll be a little bit cheaper because they do a lot more of them, and those kind of coffees are often not quite as expensive to produce or to buy for the roaster. So it's a good place to start. Often these coffees are in the kind of medium roast range. They also make tremendously delicious milk drinks. So if you're buying an espresso machine and thinking about making someone else in your house delicious milk drinks because they're not as obsessed with espresso as you might be, these kind of blends are a great place to start. Once you get into them, you might wonder what else coffee can do in terms of flavor, and you can begin to explore a little bit more. As a bonus, these kind of coffees are often a little bit more tolerant to variances in that espresso brewing recipe. If your times are a little slow or a little fast, if your weight out is a little high or a little low, it'll still taste pretty good. They're not fussy or tricky coffees to brew. They make something pretty tasty pretty easily. These are a great place to start. Don't forget, look for those kind of browning flavor words on the websites, chocolate, nuts, caramel, those kind of things. They're a good indicator that these are good coffees to start with. But what if the coffee is too bitter? Also a good question. Now, this one's a little bit easier to work out. It's going to be probably one of two things. One, the roast level of that coffee may be a little bit too dark. The darker you roast coffee, the less acidity you'll have, the more body you'll have, but you'll also get a lot more bitterness. If it is a dark roast and you find it too bitter, then you're going to look for something that is more of a medium roast next, as a kind of step to fix that particular problem. If you know the coffee is one you usually like and that bitterness is unusual, then it might be just you need to clean the coffee machine. We've made a big long video about cleaning. We'll make sure you can check it out. Keeping a machine clean is super important to get rid of any unpleasant and unnecessary bitterness. Now, there is one problem with the question of is it too sour or is it too bitter? There is one fundamental problem answering that question for a lot of people. I'll explain it more in a second, but first, while we're talking about adding new rituals to your life, especially to your morning, I want to talk about another new ritual that you might want to add to your day, courtesy of this video's sponsor, Trainwell. Now, Trainwell is an app that pairs you one-to-one with your own personal fitness coach. I started using it about 18 months ago. You begin by taking a little quiz, so they pair you with a kind of perfect match as a trainer. And I had to set some goals, and it wasn't going to be, I want to run a marathon, or I want to hit a certain bench press weight. What I wanted was to make exercise a regular, fun, and enjoyable part of my daily life. I wanted to build the habit of exercise. And Trainwell has been incredible in helping me in three main ways. One, obviously, accountability. Having a real person check in with you, encourage you, make sure you do your workouts has been hugely important for me. Two, flexibility. The idea of having to be at a certain place at a certain time doesn't really work for me. My life is too chaotic, and so Trainwell gives me incredible flexibility. And three, personalization, I guess. I get bored sometimes. And so being able to talk to my coach at my last check-in and change my focus away from maybe the cardio and the running I've been doing onto a little bit more resistance training is great. I turn up at the gym, I open the app, I hit go, my workout is there, it's ready for me, and I just have to get on with it. No analysis paralysis, no overthinking things, just doing the work and having fun doing it. If you want to give it a try, click the link below or use the QR code on screen, and you can have 14 days for free with your own personal fitness coach. Thanks to Trainwell for sponsoring this video. Let's talk about bitter-sour confusion, because actually it's really well documented and a bit of a problem for people getting into making coffee at home. If you think about bitterness and sourness in coffee, they're like signposts, one pointing east and one pointing west. If you mix them up, you can end up going in totally the wrong direction to try and fix the problem and only make it worse, which is very frustrating. Let's define sourness and bitterness. Now, sourness is the experience of acidity in an unpleasant way. You'll often see taste maps that will tell you that you detect sourness on the sides of the tongue. That's not true. You detect sourness everywhere. You experience it, though, as a sort of tingling sensation down the sides of the tongue, lighting up. Think about a crisp apple, a green apple. That has lovely acidity. It's quite pleasant, but you'll feel that down the sides of the tongue. If you drink lemon juice, that's sour. That's sort of violently acidic and unpleasant, and it has no balancing sweetness, and you really feel it. Bitterness, for me, in coffee, you tend to experience mostly actually in the finish. You'll take a sip of something and there'll be this blossoming, unpleasant, harsh, bitter flavor that fills your mouth. A lot of people will taste sour espresso and find it unpleasant and confronting and reach for the word that makes the most sense, which for them is bitter. Coffee's bitter, that's bad, therefore this coffee is bitter. But if you tell me the coffee's bad because it's bitter, but in fact it's sour, I'll try and fix totally the wrong problem. This is why it's really important. If you eat and drink some acidic things, pay a bit more attention to them. Stuff like fruit juices are a great example. Wine is a great example of something that has some acidity that may be positive or negative. Just pay a bit more attention there. And things like, chocolate or tonic water are good examples of kind of classic bitterness, or I guess some darker beers are a good example too. But with all of that out of the way, at this point, what if the coffee still doesn't taste good? It's tricky times. This isn't good news. This isn't stuff I hoped to talk to you about today, but it's true. I'm going to have to talk to you about it. There's the potential that the water you're brewing your coffee with could be the culprit. Now, it's less of an issue with those kind of medium style roasts, but if you're using something a little bit lighter, water quality becomes a really big deal. I don't like that this is true. I desperately wish this was not true. Now, you've got two requirements with a coffee machine. You need water soft enough that it's not going to scale up your coffee machine really quickly, block it up, clog it, cause it to fail, cause you some issues, cause you a repair bill, cause you to have a bad time. So generally speaking, I would recommend pretty soft water for your espresso machine. Not totally soft. It does need some minerals in it, both to extract coffee and then not to potentially attack the machine in a different sort of way where the water is actually corrosive due to its lack of minerals in it. So don't put distilled or pure water in your coffee machine. That would be bad. You do need some minerality. It's really hard to give you precise numbers. I'm very reluctant to do it. If you buy bottled water, you'll see on the side of it, they'll tell you how much calcium and magnesium is in there and how much of what's called bicarbonate is in there too. Roughly speaking, 40 to 60 parts of calcium is good, parts per million, and then let's say 60 to 80 parts of bicarbonate is a good place to start. That's really specific, right? And what I'll say is this: if you have hard water, softening it will be a massive leap in quality. You'll notice this big improvement. You can get that improvement again if you get into like really precise minerality in your water, but you don't have to. You don't have to. Soft water, though, is very good. If, however, your water has very low bicarbonate in it, that can manifest as an unpleasant acidity in the coffee, kind of no matter what. So hopefully we've fixed the problems well before this point, right? But now and again, I meet people and it comes down to the water they're using is kind of the problem. I don't want to recommend bottled water. I'm not going to recommend bottled water. I struggle with the waste of it. It's just unnecessary. There's not many good brands actually that are great for coffee, but softened water is a good start. We'll leave you some resources if you want to dig deeper than that. At this point, if you're still having bad coffee experiences, if you've solved for all of the other steps along the way, you're very confident you've got the right coffee, your water is good, everything's nice and clean, the recipe is good, and you're still having a really bad time, there aren't many potentials left. One of them could be the grinder. If you have a very cheap coffee grinder, particularly the ones typically under like $50 or £50 that will look like burr grinders, they're called false burr grinders. They've got little ceramic things that look a bit like metal cutting discs. They do a terrible job and they make terrible espresso. That may be a possibility. I don't like that it's true. You can get a great espresso grinder starting at like £160 or say $200 for something that will produce really, really good espresso. But the really cheap grinders can be a source of pain. That is one potential. There is, of course, the possibility that having tested for absolutely everything else, it might be that there is an issue with the machine. Generally speaking, this is very, very, very uncommon. It's highly unlikely, but it is, of course, a possibility. If your machine is not getting hot enough, you don't see any steam coming out of the group head when you flush it a little bit, if it's certainly a temperature you could touch comfortably, that's a problem, that's bad. Water should be coming out at 95 degrees Celsius or so don't touch it unless you're very confident that it's not hot. Or there could be a pressure issue. But aside from that, it's pretty rare to have those issues. What I would say is when you contact customer services at this point, talk them through the flowchart that you've been through. Be like, I've solved for the coffee, I've solved for the puck prep, I've solved for the recipe. Everything is good. My water is good. My machine is the issue. Then I think you'll find a very receptive, very helpful customer service person on the other end who really wants to make sure that they do get you a machine that is working right. I think that's pretty true for almost every brand that I've worked with. But it's usually not the machine. That's kind of, I think, one of the key things here. You've got to make sure you've solved for everything else first. Otherwise, you're just going to end up being without a machine for a few days, which would suck because you just got a new machine and you want to use it. As I said at the start, we have made videos about every topic we've talked about today in more depth. And we've also made one about steaming milk. So if you are steaming milk for you or for other people and you want to have that incredible texture microfoamed milk, We've made a video all about that. It's a very satisfying thing to learn, I promise you. Now, I'll say thank you again to Trainwell for sponsoring this video. Do check them out. There's a link on screen if you want to use that QR code, or there's a link in the description down below too. And I will say, espresso is a wonderful journey. You can take your time. It's very satisfying. You're going to get better at it and better at it. You're going to explore coffee more and more and more. And you're really not far away from making better espresso than almost every cafe near you, or maybe every cafe near you. And that's a very exciting thing. But I want to hear from you now. What didn't I answer? What issues have you had? Are there topics that we should explore more in future videos that would be helpful to you on your journey into espresso? I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.